we'd like to get started here. We're going to have everybody that served in the veterans, the military service, we're going to have them stand right now.
If there's anybody here.
If there is anybody. Just stay standing, please.
We should have said that right.
Yeah, I should have said that.
This is worse than basic training.
Push-ups for you.
We want to keep you honored as long as we can.
There you go.
We will do a short prayer and pledge of allegiance.
I'll hand a quick prayer. If everybody would stand, please. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for the people that you've brought here tonight. We ask that you give them safe travels home. We ask that you watch over each and every one of us, help us to learn what we need to learn, and most importantly, the season coming up, celebrating the birth of your Son, Jesus. Let's all remember them and keep them in our hearts. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
And we have a flag right up front here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Once again, thank you all for coming. We need to be able to have civil discussion all the time about the topics that are in front of us. We don't need any more division in this. Well, we have it in the country right now, but we certainly don't want it in South Dakota agriculture in our small communities. So let's just remember that. Let's all work together the best we can. And that's what South Dakota is about, and that's what agriculture is about. We've got a couple points we want to make. Who's going to go first? Because sometimes we kind of just talk right over each other because we think the same.
Yeah. Well, I just want to let you know how, I'll get this out here. Kind of let you know where I'm kind of coming from. I'm have a little concern about the data and what's going on there. And just a show of hands probably, which farm keeps data and records? Are you guys, I think pretty much everybody does. If so, why do you keep the data? Generally, it's to improve our profit margins. And I just feel that we're getting into a place where we're handing our data over to agencies that shouldn't. It's of great value to each and every one of us in our operations. The IRS is going to control all aspects of this data, including the tax credits. Why should we allow the IRS, U.S. Treasury Department, USDA, Department of Energy, not to mention Canada, possibly, and the EU? I think that's more valuable to us. What is the purpose of these departments having all our data? I think that's a valid question.
Yeah, and speaking of data, there was a sheet on the table that we were just running out of that talks about that there is companies out there that want your data. This website says it, that there's companies willing to pay for your data. That is really concerning. I want to restate that we are pro-agriculture. That's why we are concerned. We feel agriculture is getting over-scrutinized, and it needs to be pointed out. I gotta get these up here. Government regulations rarely help any business. I think we can all agree on that. That leads to restricting us on decision making. And the federal government, we believe, is guiding us to go a certain way. And who says that that approach is the right one? We want everybody to make decisions on sound information That's what we plan on, presenting here tonight. And we want that. Are the decisions being made for monetary influence? Some of this stuff coming at us seems to be a lot to do with money. Sometimes making a decision on too much on the money side isn't always the right one. So just keep that in mind. We just hope to spread a little bit of caution about everything so we can make a good decision.
Yeah, just take a little pause and try to assess everything about this, with the carbon intensity. That also brought me the CI score. You know, once you have your carbon intensity score on your farm, you gotta ask some questions. What do you do with it? Do you have to negotiate a price for the ethanol plant? Is there a set price for, let's say, a -10 score versus a -14? Or are they going to treat it like a moisture discount? So much every half point. Will it be a premium from 0 to -20 with your CI score? Is it going to be a discount from 0 to 20? Who gets to decide? Will having a CI score even be beneficial to your farm? Those kind of questions we just kind of want to address, and hopefully we get some valid information here tonight.
I have a quick question. Is anybody here a fan of the IRS? Please raise your hand if you are. Huh, that's funny. There isn't anybody. It's kind of surprising, but there's a lot of the research we've been doing. They say the IRS, the rules are pending from the IRS, so they're deeply involved in all this. The Department of Energy is. There's a lot of government agencies, and most of us don't like government agencies. I mean, that's almost without being said. I might throw out a quick scenario here. Hopefully it makes sense. This is a lot about saving energy, saving the environment. I just have a thought. A real fast way to save energy and money, what if we all went home tonight, turned our thermostat down from 68 to 58? Instantly, I mean like that, we're saving money and energy. Would everybody agree with that? Sounds simple. So when I hear agriculture being told that we need to do so many things because we're getting tough on the environment, we need to change our ways. Well, there's a lot of ways to save energy and save the environment. So when I feel agriculture's getting a little bit more scrutiny than we need, I'm gonna look and say, well, what about this? What about that? I think that's only fair. But if we did all go do that, how long is that gonna last before you get some pushback from somebody in your house, or yourself, you get tired of being a little bit cold? Vice versa in the summer, if somebody says, keep your thermostat up, we'll save energy. So just a thought, imagine if the whole country did that, turned down the thermostat, the northern half of the country that's heating. We would save more energy and money than you could even, it'd be hard to even calculate, but it would be very substantial. But why aren't they suggesting that? Because they know there's gonna be pushback. What if you turned it down even lower? Or what if say the government, there's smart meters now, you can have your home where you can control everything from your phone. Would you be willing to have the government have your smart meter? Say you do get an energy kickback for turning down your thermostat in the winter and up in the summer. And how low would you go? At what point do you decide it's not worth it? At some point, you're gonna get pushback. It's not gonna be worth it because you might have some 4-letter words coming at you from your family. You're gonna get something back once you go too far. Just another way to look at things, because there's always another angle that can make things a little bit more clear. That's just how my mind works. Just look at it a different way, because I don't think agriculture is the only industry or thing that's using energy, and everything uses energy. Just think about that. Where do you draw the line on all these things? At some point, you got to look at who's making these rules, and when will it ever end? We don't know that. I don't think anybody does. So we just want to express caution on everything that's coming at us. That's about all I got.
Yep. With that, I think we'll just start with our first speaker here, Walt Bones, and then we'll go down the line here. I believe he'll take questions at any time or after or whatever.
Yeah, well, if you got a question, he said he'll raise your hand, we'll run the cordless mic out to you. And he'll take a couple afterwards, but we do want to kind of keep things moving.
Well, good evening, everyone. This is a really good turnout. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Met Craig here probably a month and a half ago after an event in Hartford, and I really appreciated the respectful nature that we were able to discuss a couple different items and topics. And so when he asked me to come up here tonight, yeah, no problem, because and again, they set the tone. If we can have some, respectful discussion, I think that's really good. I think diverse opinions are good. A friend of mine, I think, stated it probably as well as I ever could, but Scott Phillips is his name. He ranches out north in New Underwood, but he said, if all you guys thought exactly the same way as I do, you'd all been trying to marry my wife. So diverse opinions, I think, are good, and that's a good thing. So I thought maybe before Craig asked me to talk about what we're doing on our farm down. I farm down by the Parker area. I'm fourth generation, got two brothers, brother-in-law, and just in the last 8-10 years or so, my three nephews have joined us, and they're going to be our fifth generation, so we're really proud of that. But I thought before I got into kind of how we're looking at using the carbon intensity score thing, I'd maybe give you just a little bit of history as to kind of what shaped, our mindset, or kind of not necessarily our vision or our mission. And so, my brothers and I had a sister at that time that were part of the operation that came back in the late 70s, early 80s, and what a great time to start farming, right? Because we ran right into the farming crisis in the mid 80s. And Dad had, kind of been following the advice of the bankers and everybody else. And again, he was trying to do some of the same challenges that we were going to have 10, 15 years down the way. But, how do you make room for more family members, right? So, at that time, you had inflation, your assets were appreciating, and the bank was using asset valued lending at that time. So the more your assets met up, the more you could borrow, right? And that, that worked out well. Until your assets all got during deflation, they went about half. So I still remember it vividly. Bank called us down, and we had one of those come to Jesus meetings, and Dad brought us all with him. And again, I had my three brothers and my sister, and the bank said, you need to sell some livestock, you need to sell some land to get your balance sheet back in order. And my dad pounded, I remember it to this day, he pounded his fist on the table, and he says, how do you expect us, and with the family, how do you expect us to work out of this hole if we sell the factory? And adamant, just absolutely adamant. So we made it. We adjusted a few things, the bank worked with us, we made it through those tough times. It was a great lesson to learn. So that kind of shaped our attitude as to how can we continue to look at each acre, how can we get more out of every acre? So the 90s came along, we started looking, again, my partners, my two brothers, brother-in-law, and myself started looking, we all had 2 or 3 kids. How are we going to give those kids the same opportunity that Dad gave us? And how do we shape that operation? How do we give them that same opportunity? So we, back then, I think the common practice, or the kind of the model, I guess you could say, for the day, was you went and you looked at the plat book, and you found out who owned the land, and then you contacted that landowner and you tried to outbid your neighbor, right? For the cash rent. We were not going to follow that model. We would rather collaborate with neighbors and cooperate with them rather than compete against them. So we went to work and organized a bunch of neighbors and came up with and put up a 1,500 cow milking dairy. And that, for a whole bunch of reasons, but the whole plan and the whole thought process was to add, more value for every acre. And it gave us an opportunity to sell, corn silage instead of just grain. So instead of hauling the corn to town, we could sell corn silage. And by doing that, we saved the harvest cost. We didn't have any trucking, didn't have any shrink, didn't have any field loss. Especially this, we looked at this year with, combining 13-14% corn and all the butt shelling that we had. It was a huge advantage. So, didn't have any storage, didn't take any discounts at the elevators. So it gave us an opportunity to not only do that, but we also were able to target that market. We were able to produce some, grow some different hybrids that had a little more digestibility. Again, we were producing for that market. So again, we added, stayed with our vision of adding more value, and instead of throwing our corn, sending it to town to the market, and take what the market was paying, we were producing a higher value for a market that was there. So we thought our mission was accomplished. And along the way, we continue to improve our land through proven conservation measures, just like you all do, right? We all are planting trees, we're putting filter strips, along waterways. We reduced our tillage, better fertilizer management, rotationally graze our pastures, wildlife food plots, using nutrients from the dairy and then a local swine farm, cut our commercial fertilizer usage probably by 2/3, and along the way, using those better nutrients, the organic matter in our soil improved about 20%, improved 40% in the last 20 years. So, and we do these practices because it's good for the soils, it's good for the water, it's good for the wildlife, and it's good for our bottom line. So with that history, and again, that's the mindset that we've been operating on. And I retired about 3 years ago, but the nephews and my brothers are still farming. But so to tonight's topic, we're talking about carbon intensity scores. So like all of you, we've all been flooded with information from a variety of sources wanting to help us market our ability to sequester carbon, right? I mean, and what does that mean? So first you have to accept the concept of climate change. Well, not global warming or not global cooling, it's climate change. And I'm all in on climate change. And I believe our climate changes, and I thank God that our climate has changed, or else I'd be trying to grow corn on a 150-foot thick glacier on Turner County. The climate does change. My wife and I built our house 30 years ago on a glacial moraine. So the question is our use of carbon-intense fuels influencing the speed by which the climate is changing? And here's the debate and frankly my frustration when it comes to this whole issue. You can find science to back up basically whatever side that you're on. To me, science is indisputable. It's data-driven and it's collected through internationally accepted standards. It's 100% repeatable. And then it's universally accepted through peer reviews. I mean, those are the steps for me that qualify as science. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, whatever side you want to be on, with today's internet, you can find what you look for. So it confirms the bias that we already have on a lot of our topics. So it's really tough to try to, again, overcome some of our biases and look at a topic and come to a point or get that true information. So again, back to the CI scores. Every major foreign and U.S. corporation, along with many states, have made pledges to slash the CI scores of their products to a larger and larger consumer base that is demanding that they do so. These consumers are our consumers too, and I think we would be remiss if we ignored this trend and this market opportunity. So what have we done on our farm? I guess that's kind of what Craig asked me to come to, and that's kind of what I'm finally getting around to. So keeping in mind our vision or goal of adding more value per acre. Like you, we've seen all the programs offered by the seed and the chemical companies. So first off, we went to a meeting probably 2-3 years ago at Dakota Ethanol. They were going to do some pilot programmings and modeling. Unfortunately, our farm down in Turner County was not in their survey area. Next, we explored Greenstone. Greenstone was a part of Pipestone Systems. Pipestone's model is that they gather groups of farmers and put them together in a cooperative, and then help manage whatever it might be, if it's a swine unit or a finishing system or whatever it is. But they got into an idea where if they could connect or get about, you say, 1 million acres or more, we each paid in $1 that gave them some capital to go out and try to market or to see what collectively, 1 million acres of crop ground might be worth on that market. They have since merged with Indigo, which you may have heard of. There was an article here just in Top Farmer magazine about a month or so ago. We also have explored a group called AgSpire. A number of those folks are right here in South Dakota. They're, again, a number of these corporations, a lot of these large companies have made commitment to their customers and to their shareholders that they're going to cut their carbon, their footprint, right? And frankly, there's a lot of them that are having a hard time doing that. Extremely hard time doing that. The AgSpire folks are using farmers and ranchers and what they're doing, their practices, to help those corporations meet those goals. Hosted them, showed them around our farm, and as we were driving around, said, oh, you're using livestock nutrients, check that box. Oh, you're using cover crops, check that box. Oh, you got cows out there grazing the corn stalks, check that box. Minimum tillage, check that box. And there was others. My point is, we were already doing a majority of the practices needed to qualify for these programs. So did we go search the government websites and find out what programs are available and what they were paying and then modify what we were doing to go get a government check? No. We did them because we felt it was the right thing for us to do on our operation. And if those practices qualified us for some additional value from each acre, so be it. So our farm's future is in the hands of my 3 nephews, our 5th generation. And I think the question for all of us is, will our future markets incentivize low carbon intensity score production? And that might be corn, might be soybeans, it might be our livestock, beef, pork, whatever. If so, do we want to participate? Is it going to be optional? And what, if anything, do we need to do on our farms to qualify and capture any potential value that's offered? So that's what we've done on our farm. And so, Craig, hopefully that's what you were looking for. Again, if you have any questions, fine now, or I'll be around, we can answer them later. But I thank you all very much for the opportunity, and Merry Christmas to everybody.
I have a
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
I have a question.
I can run
So,
over.
I've heard.
You're close enough.
Oh, okay.
I can hear you.
I've heard this repeated before, that our consumers are demanding lower CI scores. Most consumers don't know what a lower CI score is. And the only ones demanding a lower CI score are the government agencies. And the people that are giving away money to get the lower CI score. It's not the consumers asking for it. Have you asked your Coca-Cola company if they're lower CI scored? Do you ask when you buy your car if they have a lower CI score? That wording, that is propaganda.
My sister-in-law flew out here to visit us. She's out in New Jersey. And when she went on the Delta Airlines app or whatever it was, wherever she got her flights, she had an opportunity to have a lower CI score flight. Cost her a little bit more, but she had that opportunity. So I think it's out there. Obviously California, Oregon, Washington, Arizona, soon to probably be Minnesota.
Propaganda would be
So,
out there.
but-
There's no, what's the reason for it?
so they've got state, that's their goals of their government again, right? But they're, it's out there and they're willing to pay for it. I truly believe that, so.
I'm gonna just say one thing.
Yes,
It's
sir.
all about government control.
Yeah,
It is,
yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Okay, yes, ma'am.
I, maybe not as educated as most people are, but I'm wondering, did these companies, do you have a CI score?
No, not
That's
yet.
what- I mean, I didn't know how common that was.
No, not yet, no. Again, it's still all in, there's a lot of moving parts yet. So, we're just exploring it. Someday down the road, we may not. Depends on, again, if it fits into our program. Are we gonna make major changes in our operation to qualify? I don't think so. But, if it's out there, we might take advantage of it. So, again, these are the options that we've been looking at. Yes, sir.
Do you have any idea what was different about that CI score flight? I mean, was it a different plane, or was it just another seat on the same plane?
Same seat on the same plane? Yeah, you just paid more for it to make you feel better.
You just nailed it.
Yeah, but, I think this younger generation, and I don't think it's probably as maybe a big a deal out here in the Midwest, but, there's a lot of folks out on the coast that, I think they're probably, a lot bigger deal with them than it probably is around here.
May I say one other thing?
Please.
Back in the mid-70s, when I was trucking to LA and that, I'd come up off the mountain, look down, you couldn't see LA at all. Even in the early 90s already, it's cleared up so you could see the whole town. Whatever that happened, I don't know. I think.
No, I did the same thing. I delivered some bulls to a bull test station in Chicago and pulled into Chicago in the early morning and came up and the sky was just yellow, I think we can credit ethanol and cleaning up the air pollution there quite a bit in not only, those big cities, but on the West Coast as well. So, the cleaner fuels is definitely a big deal. Yes?
You said you were trying to have added value per acre.
Mm-hmm.
So who's providing that added value? Is that funded by the federal government then?
Well,
Can you repeat the question?
yeah, he said we're trying to add added value per acre. And so in the case of our Turner County Dairy Project, again, the dairy is paying for all of our harvest costs. And we didn't have to, again, we don't have to pay for combining, we don't have to pay for our trucking.
That's lowering your expenses. I'm talking
Right.
about the money, the extra money that we're receiving from somewhere apparently.
We haven't gotten anything,
No, not yet, but
Right.
all this goes through. And a lot of this, there's millions, not billions of federal dollars behind all this.
Mhm.
So what happens when our budget is so screwed that they can't balance a checkbook, let alone our nation's deficit? So when these programs, when they decide, hey, we don't have the funding to keep, the money to keep funding these programs, then what?
I know the Ag Spire program's coming from the companies themselves. It's not government money, it's coming from the companies themselves. So. Yeah, you pick your company, and again, you could go off on a whole nother debate. We could talk all night about carbon offsets, and the companies can come here and again reward us for for the carbon sequestration things that we do, and they can keep doing what they do. So
You guys say you'll get tax credits.
I didn't say that. No,
Well,
no.
that's one of the things on the table is, you can get tax credits.
I mean, that's one of the things that's being proposed is the 45Z tax credits. And I'm surely not an expert in that, but those are being discussed for, they're coming, I think they start here in 2025, if I remember right. There's an opportunity there to, again, I think the intent with 45Z, or at least the intent of a lot of farm organizations, is to try to get farmers the same opportunities to capitalize on these programs as other companies are. And again, a whole nother debate if you want to talk about tax credits and incentives. I mean, you know, tell me a local governmental agency that doesn't incentivize business, right? You know, our local counties incentivize businesses here with, you know, tax, you know, they have a 5-year, you know, incremented tax on their property taxes, or, you know, our state incentivizes businesses. The federal government does the same thing. You know, and all industries, again, I'm probably talking a little bit out of school here, but, you know, again, the federal government is, and states and local governments are trying to incentivize important businesses that are vital to the country, right? I mean, we need oil, so the oil companies get huge incentives, huge tax breaks. So you know, probably could almost name an industry that doesn't get tax breaks, and so it's one way that government can incentivize and get businesses and local governments rolling. So, yes, sir.
Please use the mic.
I've heard that to make, how do I want to say this? You would have to have so many contingencies to it to ever qualify to get that incentive from whoever these people are. You'll never make it and get your money from them.
I would disagree with it.
I know that you have come real closer than a lot of people probably ever have, and you haven't got any though.
We haven't applied for anything yet. I mean, we're still looking at some programs, what's available, but,
Do you think you'll ever get through enough of it that you will get an incentive for it?
we don't know. I mean, that's why we're digging. You know, that's why we're digging, if they're there. But again, we're not gonna drastically change everything that we do to just qualify for, you know, government check, right? That's why our farm caps are curved, right? So we can see in the mailbox if our checks are, right? Anyway.
We've heard that one for 30 years.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody wants to farm for the government. At least we don't. I don't think any of us want to farm for the government. So, you know, I think we all want to try to, you know.
We got one more question,
We
Walt.
are the government.
Yeah,
I have to say that, we are the
I
government.
would agree with that.
That's what we should clarify, we are the
I
government.
would agree with that, yeah.
We are farming for ourselves.
Yeah, we have, yep, I would agree with that, yeah.
So, right now, number 2 yellow corn is number 2 yellow corn. Everybody's number 2 yellow corn. There's really no difference between it. After we do this, we're basically looking at this number 2 yellow corn is different than that number 2 yellow corn because it has a different CI, correct?
Right?
You know, the hog industry and the poultry industry, especially the hogs, have done a really good job of making every pork chop look like the pork chop before it and the pork chop after it. And we have been preached to in the cattle industry that we need more uniformity so that we have everything the same. And what we're doing here with a commodity that is already there, that has all consistency, and what we're trying to do is say, let's differentiate it. Is there any other industry that has had this type of uniformity that has decided to differentiate it and has been successful and created more opportunity for that market?
You know, I would answer that and say that, in my opinion, at the table of opportunity, there's room for everybody. I don't necessarily, I don't buy grass-fed beef. But you know, there's a lot of people that do, and they're willing to pay for it. I don't go out and search out organic vegetables or organic things in the grocery store. That's fine, but there's a lot of folks that do. And so, yeah, you're differentiating things there in that respect, and more power to you. I mean, you've got consumers out there that are willing to pay more for, in my opinion, basically the same thing. And so,
In general, the final consumer doesn't buy our product. I mean, 50-some% of our product goes to ethanol plants. They aren't buying the corn from that, you know, that's not the final consumer. The rest of it is either going to exports or is going to feed. This isn't a final product. I mean, we keep talking about the market is calling for this, but when Adidas took over Nike, there were no government programs in order to make people wear Adidas versus Nike. You know, I agree with her statement that no, the marketplace isn't calling for this, government is calling for this. And I think that we're falling into a trap of, we're gonna take a very consistent product and we're gonna mess it up. And rather than building a consistent product like the pork producers did, we're gonna actually destroy what we already have.
Well, I guess we could look at ethanol. Again, you mentioned ethanol too. Again, you take 2 gallons of ethanol, exactly the same chemical analysis. But if you can get rid of sequester the carbon, to use this carbon dioxide somewhere, somehow, now that value of that gallon of carbon dioxide, same thing, is probably worth anywhere from 50 to 70 cents more per gallon. We get 3 gallons of ethanol, or 3 gallons of ethanol per bushel of corn. Now you're talking another, $1.50, $2 a bushel value added to that corn that somebody's willing to pay for. And so why not take advantage of the market?
Have you ever, I've never been to a gas station where it gave me the CI on that ethanol.
We don't need it around here. No, I haven't been. But you get out west, and again, I haven't been out to California lately, but they're sure willing to pay for it. So, and then there's a market out there, and our ethanol plants are trying their best to, do what they can. They have limited opportunities right now, but they are marketing some of this stuff, and people are willing to pay for it.
We got another question.
Okay.
That'll be the last one.
All right.
Okay, before the election, you were on TV wanting to promote this CO2 pipeline.
Go ahead.
So if ethanol has a better product because of that pipeline, why can't they pay for it themselves instead of asking the government to subsidize it?
I was on TV promoting a yes vote on referred law 21. Had nothing to do with the pipeline. Nothing to do with the pipeline. So read the bill. Read the bill. Read the bill. I know Jim and I could probably talk about this all night long. But it had, if you read the bill, you look at what it said. It was not a referendum on a pipeline. It was not. I understand that, but again, a no vote gave $3.5 million back to Summit every year that would have gone to counties. $40 million over 12 years. And,
Only if you take it out of your left pocket and put it in your right, doesn't make you rich.
yeah, that's probably going in a direction you don't want to go here, but anyway.
So, my name is Jim Eschenbaum. I was chairman of that ballot referral effort, RL21. And on the topic of carbon scores, that's what we're here tonight about, and these ethanol plants and wanting to have a lower carbon score. My friend Doyle Turner from Northwest Iowa is here, and Doyle and I are going to be going to the media. This pipeline is absolutely unnecessary. Doyle has got 2 companies from out east who are willing to set up and partner with the ethanol plants on site and capture that carbon. If carbon is really a problem, they will set up on site, capture that carbon and make sustainable aviation fuel or methanol for ships out of that product. We would keep that value of that carbon, or what's produced out of that carbon. We would keep that value right here in South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, wherever that carbon is converted into something of more value. That money would stay here rather than piping it all to North Dakota. We do not need a taxpayer-funded pipeline, strictly taxpayer-funded pipeline that has risk involved to solve this carbon problem. And Doyle and I are going to be going to the media and starting this discussion. If we do indeed need to capture carbon and utilize this carbon index score, there's better ways to do it. So anyway, we will be starting that discussion.
just one quick point, then, and again, as I understand it, that will cost each ethanol plant somewhere between $500 and $700 million apiece. Carbon pipeline will cost the ethanol plants nothing. Anyway, thank you.
We gotta move on. We'll introduce Sjaard, John? Did I pronounce that right?
Sjaard, yep.
He's a farmer, District 2 state rep. He will speak roughly 5 minutes, and he wants to wait till he's done if there's a couple questions, because we gotta keep moving here. Thank you, Walt.
Okay, John, District Representative, East Sioux Falls, Valley Springs. I farm out there, raise corn, soybeans, hogs, and cattle. I've been diving into this carbon intensity scoring on the corn and just kind of share some information that I've learned on it. To answer your question, Doyle, about a product that people want to screw up, pork is a big thing, like Prop 12 in California. They want to have the mother sows be grown differently, to have a different product. And everyone's fighting that law, but it's the exact same concept. They're going to grow corn differently to have different scores. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so we think we said this, but low carbon corn, high carbon corn, middle carbon corn is the exact same thing. You can't tell a difference. The test's the same. It feeds the pigs the same, but it makes ethanol the same. There's no different in it. I grow non-GMO soybeans. They're very different than GMO soybeans. You'll know if you spray Roundup or Enlist on them. You'll have dead beans when you're done.
Been there, done that.
Well, when you take your non-GMO beans to the processing plant, they do a test on it right there. That takes 10 minutes. They can tell, yes, they are different, so they're worth more because they're different. So that's, there's nothing different about the corn that gets produced. The only thing different about it is how you produce it. And how are you going to prove that you produce it that way? Well, there's a third party that tests what you do and collaborates what you say. Well, there's so much room for corruption in this. I'm not saying anybody's corrupt right now, but if you start taking $1 a bushel times 200 bushels an acre times thousands of acres, there's millions of dollars out there for people that want to get together and say, we can just say you did it this way or make up reasons or try and get those dollars in a bad way. So we just got to safeguard against that if this is going to go any further. Talking about who gets to make these scores. In Brazil, because they burn trees to make their ethanol instead of natural gas like we do, they get a lower score somehow for that. Who gave them the right to make that rule to lower that score? They grow 2 crops on their ground in 1 year, so they get a lower score for that. Why is that any fair? And who gave them the right to say that that's the way it should be? Also, uniformity. So I have one third party verifier that I called, and they said, I'm going to use a mulch finisher. I do 1 pass in front of my corn, I use a mulch finisher. It's got a disc in the front, field cultivator, drag in the back. They said, okay, it's a 3-pass system because you do 3 different things to your soil. I said, that's not right, it's just 1 pass. They said, nope, it's a 3-pass system. I called another third-party verifier. They said, nope, that's a 1-pass system. So there's no uniformity in how they're calculating this thing yet, which that's something that we need. Also, fertility. When I'm a corn soybean rotator guy, which I'm sure many people are here, I like to figure out how much fertilizer I use on the corn, on the beans, put it all in front of the corn. I save a pass of fertilizer that way. I no-till my beans to get my fertilizer incorporated that way. I use DAP, diammonium phosphate, 18% nitrogen that I get to use in my corn that way. I tell the verifier I'm putting 2 years of fertilizer in front of my corn. They say, well, you got to count all the fertilizer you put on that year against your corn. I said, well, that's not what it's used. That's not how I'm using it. Well, that's how it's going to get scored against you. So either we have to split it up or put it all in front of the beans. So you have none in front of your corn, well, then you have, a better carbon score, but then you're being corrupt again. So that's, they're not figuring things the right way. And I think we mentioned this before, but there's a bushel of corn is value. When the ethanol industry started growing, it added value to that bushel of corn. You can make ethanol out of it. The hog producers, cattle producers made money with it. Livestock feeders don't like paying more for their corn, but if you ask most livestock feeders when they made the most money, it's when corn is high priced, because that's just how the competition works and how the supply and demand works. But here we're taking, and I think Doyle mentioned this a while ago, you're taking a bushel of corn that has a certain value, and you're just adding a government subsidy to some of it. Well, that doesn't work in the commodity market when you're going, this bushel of corn is worth $1 more than this bushel of corn. Or how is the hog guy going to be able to buy that corn against the ethanol guy that has a government subsidy to put with it? So it just screws up the competition, and the farmer feeder too. I grow corn, I feed it to my hogs and cattle. Like, I'm trying to add value to the hogs and cattle with it. While the neighbor's growing corn, he's giving it to the ethanol plant. They're putting a subsidy on it. So it just messes up the whole industry and how it works. So anyway, that's what I've gotten out of the carbon intensity, and I'll take any questions if you have any.
I've got one. Go on. Hello, there we go. Can you go over that phrase about the soil finisher was considered 3-pass? That was crazy.
Yeah, so it's got a disc in the front, mulch finish, you guys know what soil finish is, disc, a field cultivator, and a drag in the back. So it does 3 different things to the soil. So they said it's a 3-pass system.
So you were penalized, your score would be penalized for that?
So your score would be penalized because how they calculate all the inputs you have, so the less passage you have, the better. So this is a 3-pass system they figured for that. So it would be a higher intensity score by using that.
That's, and I'd say insanity right there. I think everybody would agree. Are there any questions?
So how far did you make it? Did you get a CI score?
So I gave them my inputs, and even like the chemicals you use, like when you make Callisto or Dual, that has a certain CI, so you have to tell them which chemicals you use, they factor that in. So I've given them my chemicals, I've not given them my yields yet, they make the calculation of how good the yields are, so I don't have a score yet.
How far do they go back? How many years do they go back?
It's a year-by-year basis and a farm-by-farm basis, so I'll get the score on this farm, a score on that farm, a score on that farm for this year. So yeah, the bushels off this farm will be a different score than the bushels off of this farm, and they're all in the same bin, and I mean, yeah.
Was this a private company?
Yes, yep.
Hi, John.
Hey, Julie,
How you doing?
good to see you.
John, you shared with us in legislation last session how your carbon index score was going to affect your banking. Could you share that with the audience? Do you remember our conversation? The bank, that you had to have meet certain carbon or certain, no?
No, my banker told me because of some Dodd-Frank rule, if I needed to renew my loan instead of get a new one, because if I got a new one, they'd ask what orientation I was.
Okay, I apologize.
Yeah.
Well, folks, this carbon index score is going to affect your banking. And if your carbon index score, it's coming, it's already happening in Europe. If your carbon index score is not at a certain level, they won't borrow you money. So what you have to understand is when you're buying into this carbon index score system, you are giving them permission to control everything. And my advice to you is to start saying no. Because if we start allowing them to determine that if in order for you to get a loan for your soybean or your corn for next year or your fertilizer, you have to have a carbon index score of, give me a number.
Yeah, 10 or
10.
0 or.
If your carbon index score is not 10, you're going to pay a higher interest rate. Or we're not going to borrow you money at all. So I don't know how many of you need money to operate in your farms, but we do really need to pay attention to where this carbon index scoring is going.
And then on top of that, they can change the goalpost at any time.
Right.
Exactly.
They move it. You get to meet it, and then all of a sudden you need an 8.
That was the deal with the pipeline too. You have the pipeline, oh, we got this, and then they can just stroke of a pen and change it, yeah.
You mentioned the Todd Frank bill.
Yep.
That's pathetic.
Yep.
Hopefully Trump can get rid of some of that.
My name's John Coonery. I think the lady over here exactly hit it on the nail on the head. Once you buy into something, we've learned in the last 5 years, the goalposts continue to move. Look to Europe, what they've done there, in places like Netherlands. I know some of you, maybe your ancestors came from those places. And now those governments who are bought into the globalist plans are basically finding and using these things, reduction in carbon, nitrogen, etc., to say you've got to eliminate 30%. Some in our own so-called government at the federal level say we've got to eliminate 50% of farming. And ultimately this is total control, and so just be aware.
would just like to add, the young lady up here had mentioned, I had just read an article that came out of Mitchell, and a legislator had sent it to me, and it was about the CI score, and actually the nuts and bolts of it were pretty good. But it led off with the idea in the first paragraph that this is consumer driven. And I would just like to piggyback off of what you said, and I said, you know, this article is good, but the premise that it's built upon, I believe, is false. I do not think, I mean, otherwise we'd see electric vehicles flying off of the lots. And what did we see? We saw them sitting there. Because number one, I don't think it's consumer driven, and number two, it's not cost effective for the consumer to be purchasing these products. Federal subsidies are pushing this, however, and we all know that it's not just starting with our federal government, it's beyond that. It's the Paris Climate Agreement and the World Economic Forum and all of those things that they have signed off for. And you know, if you listen to Klaus Schwab, I mean, he said you own nothing and you'll be happy. Larry Fink of BlackRock has come out and said we need to force change. We need to force change. How does that sound to you? This is forced change of how we produce, how we live, and its control. And I just wanted to add a couple things really quickly. You know, this is a manipulated market. It is based on the GREET model, which is, you know, tied to the USDA and Argonne Labs, voodoo math, if you will, because they can change that. You and I have discussed that, John. They can change that model at any time and get you to, but two articles I want to mention to you. One I just got in my email today, a legislative email. House Judiciary report alleges a collusive climate cartel tried to force Exxon to go to net zero. Now you guys can look that up for yourself, but the House Judiciary in the United States is investigating that right now. Also, I want you to know that Attorney General Ken Paxton from Texas is suing BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard for illegally conspiring to manipulate energy markets, driving up costs for consumers. So all of these things are connected, and start doing your research, start looking into this stuff, because number one, overall, this is about control.
Yeah, two comments on that. If it is consumer driven, it's because they've infiltrated our education system and taught these kids for the last 20 years, the world's gonna end if we don't do something. So these kids are scared, we need to do something, so they're using that. And also, a wise man once told me, energy is freedom. If you can go buy a car, put in your gas, you can go somewhere, you are free. So it's all about having cheap energy, and they just don't want that. They want to control energy, want to control carbon, that's all about control.
I have a little different perspective on this. I studied planetary thermodynamics, and you know, I study a number of different IPCC peer-reviewed scientists. Right now, parts per million are 422 parts per million. It's going to hit in April, probably about 430. That's how fast it's increasing. We've doubled the amount of CO2 in the past 30 years. A healthy planet is at about 270 parts per million. Now, it's not just the CO2 that's the problem. If you go with the CH4, which is methane, this is releasing from the permafrost and from the cryosphere exponentially more each year because it's warming. It's getting hard for us to turn this around if we don't deal with this right now. One of the things that kind of got me studying this for the past 10 years is I seen a little video, and it was Stephen Hawking. He warned that in a worst case scenario, the planet's average surface temperature could reach 250 degrees Celsius by the year 2096. That's 482 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that's if feedback loops go wild. Now you're going to see a lot of other peer-reviewed scientists that would argue against that. Stephen Hawking did win Nobel Prize because of his physics and his intelligence. He solved Einstein's general theory of relativity where nobody else could for 50 years. So he's not stupid. But I would think that he's probably pushing the worst case scenario a little bit fast. But the thing is, the human species would go extinct somewhere between 6 and 12 degrees Celsius. So we do need to address this situation. Now, if you go to NOAA, Zach Labe, Paul Beckwith, Peter Wadhams, there's a whole number of people you can look at, get information. But United Nations, check the IPCC peer-reviewed, AR6 report. You look at the data sets. Zach Labe is probably a good one to look at, on some of this stuff, because he will show you the CH4 level, which is going through the roof exponentially. He will show you also the CO2, which is going up pretty quickly. There's also nitrous oxide. And nitrous oxide is 315 times more powerful than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. And it's coming out of the cryosphere where the sunlight doesn't hit it. It's from bacteria. And this is around the entire planet. That's going exponential too. Now, you can kind of smirk and all this stuff, but this is the whole reason that your grandchildren are actually, their lives are in jeopardy.
Do you believe in God?
That's kind of up to
The good
each.
Lord's got control over all of it.
The last person that told me that God wouldn't allow that to happen died from COVID. He died from COVID.
Oh, yeah, and I know.
I'll just comment that if you overlay the carbon in the atmosphere with the yields from corn yields, it kind of goes up exactly the same. So I think our planet was created by an intelligent designer that knew we needed more people on the earth, we needed more food, and how it kind of works together. So.
I was just curious, you said the human race would go extinct or be non-existent 6 to 12 degrees Celsius?
Celsius, it's estimated, we're gonna.
I'm curious how much time do I have? When's that happen?
Well, it depends who you ask. Check out Dr. Guy McPherson, he's pretty pessimistic, or you can go check out Michael Mann, he's more optimistic.
I've got a question. Is there anybody in this room that would steal money from their kids, their grandkids, or their great-grandkids? Because every one of these government-funded boondoggles is adding to our federal debt that is already at near unsustainable level, if it isn't unsustainable. And we can't keep counting on the federal government to fix every damn problem for us. We can't.
We got to.
Thank you, guys.
Our next speaker
Yep.
just snuck out to the.
Thank you.
I think you had a restroom break.
He'll be right back, I just went to the facilities.
Yeah, here's the time.
Yeah, I guess
We got a second here.
Here, he's back.
he's back. I just got a question. Can anybody tell me which one of these ears of corn is low CI and which one isn't?
Anybody?
Well, the IRS can, so.
Here's another one. My wife got a package, she gets packages all the time. Where are my glasses?
Yes, we are.
Well, it says on here, carbon offset shipping. Etsy offsets 100% of the carbon emissions from your delivery. Like Walt said, it gives me a warm fuzzy feeling, I guess.
Well, Anthony will be our next speaker here, and I want to introduce him. We couldn't get Bill Nye, the science guy. So we got Anthony Bly, the soil guy.
And hopefully if you can maybe tighten up your we're getting a little bit long on questions, but
Yeah.
we've got some good questions.
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna generate a bunch too, but, well, thanks for the warm reception. I don't deserve that. But yeah, I come from a farm. I'm 4th generation. Hope to put the 5th generation on the farm, right? My dad tried to, well, he did save the farm in the 80s because his brothers had struggled. I have all that in my history as well, okay? So why I say that is I'm one of you. I really am. And I really care about this discussion tonight. I wear this logo because I'm an employee of SDSU. I'm not political. I'm a little nervous because I have some politicians in the room. My goal is to remain unbiased and science-based. That's my goal. My opinion means nothing in this room right now. And I'm gonna fight not to share it. Okay? Because I have to be that way, because SDSU's called me to be that way. The dean will give me a call if I'm not. Okay? This is the 5th time I've talked about this topic. The very first time was at the farm show, and I had all these calls. Are you going to talk about the pipeline? You're going to talk about the pipeline? No, I'm not going to talk about the pipeline. I'm going to talk about science, soil health, carbon, etc. My goal is to provide you information. My goal is to help you make your own decision. I do not want to make that decision for you. So you all have an opinion. Boy, we've heard a bunch. And that's great, because isn't it great to live in a country where we don't have to fear walking out that door tonight that there's going to be somebody there? You said this or you said that.
Are you sure?
Well, I'm sure. Otherwise I wouldn't have came. So that's what we have to celebrate, right? We have to celebrate that. And I think that's truth. That's not my opinion. I think that's truth. So, navigating through a sea of carbon, I have to make some opening statements first, because I do a lot of work with the South Dakota Soil Health Coalition. They're a partner of SDSU in educational efforts. We were part of their birth, if you will. They're a learning community that wants to focus on soil health. There are other learning communities that SDSU works with. Beef, cow-calf producers. People that have high tunnels. So the university purpose is to serve our clientele. Okay? So I have to make these statements. Soil health did not create carbon markets and provide solutions for climate change. Okay? Soil health on its own is a set of practices focusing on improving the soil. Soil health improvement on its own without carbon programs improves and builds the soil for continued food production from generation to generation. Soil health improves nutrient cycling, water infiltration, storage, reduces the need for continuing and increasing inputs. We have farmers that have experienced this. And if you want to know some, I can introduce them to you. Soil health is a generational practice. You just don't start and stop doing it. It's a commitment. Okay? Soil health benefits everyone in society. And like I said, I cannot tell you what to do. I do not want to tell you what to do. It's just providing an educational opportunity. Hopefully, it will spur you to get more educated. Read more articles. Read more science. I really liked what Mr. Bones said about science, because he hit it right on the mark. And you can find science to say whatever you want, but it's still science. And it's how we interpret what that means. Okay, it's a protocol, and they follow a protocol. Anyway, these are the soil health principles. Again, these CI scores and all this discussion was not birthed from these principles. okay? Keeping the ground covered, protecting it from wind and water erosion. So you do that by limiting tillage, okay? The prairie didn't get plowed. It grew every year for eons and put carbon into the soil. Biological diversity is how it kept surviving. Okay? We're growing a living root as much as possible. That's where cover crops come in. Even some purists in soil health circles will say we need to rotate with perennials. Some of you are doing that with alfalfa. Okay? And you don't even know it. Crop rotations. If we set up a buffet here tonight and had pudding and lettuce on it, you'd all be really mad. The biological diversity in the soil wants a big buffet because it is very diverse. It doesn't want continuous monocultures. It wants legumes. It wants forbs. It wants cool seasons and warm season plants for it to thrive and grow. Thank you, Charlie. Integrating livestock, important. They help cycle those nutrients that we're producing from our crops. And they augment the biology in the soil. Okay? If you really want to get into this, these are the 3 books I recommend. Soil Owner's Manual, The Hidden Half of Nature, and Dirt to Soil. I'll just keep flying. All these terms. Wow. Where should we start? Carbon credit certification, 45Q, ZB, greenwashing, greenhouse gases, I mean, look at them all. And what do I got up there? Don't get anxious. Please, don't go there. Don't worry about this. Get educated. It seems really tense. It seems really, and it is. But please, think about yourself and your own condition and just relax. Please, relax. Okay? Because we care about you. We do. We really do. So, I'm going to try to talk about the history of this to help you get a grips with reality. What's reality? Reality is you're in this room tonight, I'm talking to you, and it's 20-some degrees outside. Those are just bits and pieces of reality. The other reality is electricity's on, we have light, we have some heat, right? You're looking at this. So I'm gonna give you some bits and pieces of reality. Some of it you're probably not gonna like. Right? I don't like it when I go to the doctor and he says you're fat. Right? I don't like that. Got to take blood cholesterol medication and blood pressure medication. And you don't have to, but you respect the doctor because, they know the science. You don't have to do that. Okay? So some of these things, I'm the messenger. I didn't create this stuff I'm going to show you. My goal is to help you understand where this is coming from and why we're all in the room tonight talking about this, okay? So I'm going to fly. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology, this is a quote. You could go to this web link here. If we rely on carbon removal alone, we would need to sequester around 20 billion tons of CO2 a year to balance out our emissions. 20 billion tons. Okay? How many million are in a billion? Shout it out. 1,000 million in a billion. Okay? So you can take 20 times 1,000. Okay? Remember that number. Okay, the history, 45Q. Right up there in the top, Energy Improvement Extension Act of 2008 added a credit for CO2 sequestration, the 45Q. 2008. How many of you in the room knew that? Okay, because you studied it, right? Is that right? Okay. Did you know when it happened that it happened? I didn't. I live under a rock, right? Okay, so it was capped at 75 million metric tons. Remember how many million are in a billion? Or remember that? 75, that didn't make a dent in it. I mean, that, right? Okay? So it had been met. So then in 2018, it was expanded and extended. Okay? Got some details there. I'm not going to read them to you for the sake of time. Then in the taxpayer uncertainty and disaster relief to 2020 extended the construction start line.
You would take questions?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
Okay,
So let me run out the.
might open the floodgate.
Well, we got to keep it.
It's interesting that you found, you're showing, it's interesting that you're showing carbon dioxide hundreds of thousands a year back, but you selectively go back to 1890. And so we're not really comparing apples to oranges or so forth.
1890, where do you get that?
Well, the next slide that you just showed.
This is 1960, that's 2020.
The colored slide that you showed, this.
Right here,
So
right here.
1890, so you don't go back in
Well,
time.
you know why? There's no recorded data.
Oh, absolutely there is. As you said, in ice core,
No, what I mean is there's a weather station that has a thermometer that recorded that
they
number.
can tell temperatures from other sources.
Okay, oh, I got another one. Here it comes. Well, it's gonna come, I'm sorry. It's a battle, how do you put these slides in order? But we talk about greenhouse gases, here they are. It's not just CO2, it's these other ones. And I'll explain a little bit why CO2 is like the big dog in the room in a little bit. Here's the greenhouse effect. This has been studied forever. We have glass greenhouses. You can witness it in your house. Just sit in the sunlight in the middle of the winter on the floor. You'll get warm. Sun rays are coming through. That heat is staying in the house. Okay? You didn't turn the temperature up on the thermostat. Right? That's a greenhouse effect. Same thing happens on our Earth's planet when these sunlight rays come and they bounce around. If there's too much in the atmosphere, it'll bounce them back and keep that heat in. Less reflectance back into space. Okay? This is not something new. Joseph Fourier studied it in 1827, a French mathematician. The effect of greenhouse gases on light absorption is not new either. John Tyndall in the 1860s, an Irish scientist, studied this. Okay? That's amazing work for scientists in the 1800s to study. Scientific discovery is an amazing thing. Okay? So they did that. So this is not new. It's not new. Here's what I was talking about, sir. This is the global temperature prediction estimate from a number of sources. Now, what do we got here? Millions of years. This is 485 million years back. I'm not asking you to believe that. Where are we at now? We're way over there. And that's my point for putting that up there, sir. Because I'm trying to be unbiased. Remember I said I have to be unbiased. So you have to give me a chance to get there. But I'm going to get there, right? So this is Judd et al. Science, September 2024, volume 285, number 6715. It's not Anthony Bly. Remember my goal tonight is just to portray this reality, why these things are happening. I'm not saying they're right, and I'm not saying they're wrong. Trying to give you a little understanding. That's my whole goal. So look at there. The red line I put on there, because I wanted to know what was the global surface temperature in 2023 and how would that compare to all of that data that's up on that graph? So the red line, I put that on there. Do you know I had a heck of a time finding that number? Because they want to show you the data like this. They want to show you the difference, the anomaly. So I had to kind of figure that out. And so that's why I came up with 58.96 degrees Fahrenheit average global temperature for 2023. It's the red line. You can see this team of scientists, there's like 5 or 6 on this paper, and they have categorized the time frame into warmer climate, colder climate. What does it show over there? It's the colder climate is what they're showing. Okay? So I'm just trying to remain unbiased. Okay, don't shoot the messenger. Okay? So if we look at those greenhouse gases, we can see a large portion of them are carbon dioxide. That's the elephant in the room. That's why all the talk is about carbon dioxide. These other gases, methane, way more powerful greenhouse gas. Why? Because it's chemistry. Carbon, oxygen, CO2, methane, heavy, nitrogen, hydrogen. Okay, has a different chemical way it can block light. It's chemistry, it's science. You can take that to a court of law and you can't depose that argument. Okay? That's kind of what some of this is all about. So you have to be really careful what you say. Nitrous oxide, huge greenhouse gas effect, but there's smaller amounts of that in the atmosphere right now. So the attack is on CO2. And I've put them here. CO2, CH4, N2O, and even halocarbons. And ozone is even a greenhouse gas because they've measured that getting produced in the lower levels of the atmosphere. And when that happens, it's not good. It's our friend when it's way up high. Blocks radiation and things from getting to us. Okay. Oh, our cars. This is how much CO2 they emit. Quick take a look. Manufacturing, road construction, electric and heat. You know, they know where the CO2 is coming from. Do you see agriculture in this? You don't, do you? Okay, you think about that for a while. We'll keep going. Here's the carbon cycle on the farm. Everyone hates it. Cows belching methane. We do too. Anyway, CO2 coming out of the atmosphere, taken in by the plant. The plant takes sunlight, CO2 and water, and puts the carbon in the soil. Prairie did that for a very long time. That's why you are all blessed with some of the best soil on the whole planet. Okay? You gotta know that. You're blessed. Okay? The soil microbes are a huge sink, pool for carbon. That's why we want to build soil microbiology up. These critters do our work for us. They cycle nutrients, they do tillage. They bring water and nutrients to the plant, etc. This group of U.S. farmers and ranchers in action identified practices, and I know you can't see that, but here's tillage, cover crops, and nitrogen, and their benefits for soil carbon. That's why there's so much focus on them. Okay? Reducing tillage helps build carbon in the soil. Reducing nitrogen application or how you apply it helps keep the carbon in the soil. et cetera, et cetera. Organic matter is 58% or 58% soil carbon. Okay, so if you have an organic matter test on your farm, 58% of that is carbon. There's the relationship. Here it is. This is my data, measured on projects in South Dakota. We measured organic matter and we measured organic carbon on the same sample, and that's reproducible data. You can't argue with that. That's reality. Okay? Here's the nitrogen cycle. We put fertilizer on the soil. Cows, we put manure on. Legumes fix nitrogen from the air by their rhizobium in their nodules. The organic matter contains nitrogen. It's a living cycle. It's unstoppable. The carbon cycle is unstoppable too. It happens all of the time. We just play with it a little bit. Okay? We just play with it. But there's a huge amount of fossil fuels used in and greenhouse gases released when we make fertilizer. Right? Natural gas is burnt to make anhydrous ammonia and urea and so forth. Then I've got nitrous oxide here released due to denitrification, and again the methane from the cow. Carbon is at every one of these points in that nitrogen cycle. Carbon is very important at every one of those points. Okay? Here's what we're all after. This is a nitrogen response trial, one of, a couple hundred. We study that at the university. We put out rates of nitrogen, and then we measure the yield of corn. And at this site, it only took 55 pounds of N to maximize yield. It has a huge ROI. But we know this site is 5.4% organic matter. We can't get this unless we focus on the carbon. If you're doing practices to take carbon out of your soil, you're going to push yourself further and further this way to reliance on nitrogen fertilizer. We know that. That's science. Okay? That's reality. Here's a number of those studies. 2018 to 2022, you can see that optimum nitrogen rate ranging from 0 all the way up to 153. But we know something about these that are 0. We know that these producers have focused generationally on soil health. Do these producers stop using N? No, they don't. But they don't use as much as everybody else. We know that. Could they stop? Sure, they could stop. But farmers gotta make money. I get it. We do it. Here's a relationship between organic matter and corn yield. Boy, it sure looks like the more organic matter you have, the more corn yield you will get. Okay? And that's why Mr. Bones talked about their organic matter in their farm going up. Okay? It's an important thing. We know that tillage releases carbon from the soil. There's paper after paper after paper about that. We know tillage intensity releases more carbon from the soil. Here's an example. A conventionally tilled soil and a soil health soil. Right away you can see the difference. One's black, got more carbon in it than the other one. One other difference is there's no soil structure here. It's gone. Because it has less microbes in it, less carbon. There's soil structure here, helping water and air to exchange. This soil won't get as hard as quick as this one. Okay? Let's keep going. The whole world seems like it wants your carbon. And I just took 30 minutes and I did an internet search and I found all of these firms wanting to buy your carbon or for you to use practices that will sequester carbon. Okay, there they are. I think one was mentioned tonight. There's a few others working in our state. I've met with a couple of them because they call me up and they say, Anthony, how come the farmers in South Dakota don't want to sign up? Okay? And I try to help them understand that. And that's why I'm here tonight, just to hear all of this so I can help them understand. Not to gain something on you, but this is reality. What you think and why you think it is reality. And they don't know that. They don't have a clue. They think it's just normal that, oh, why wouldn't a farmer sign up for our program? They just think it's normal. And that's reality to them. That you would. Okay? So,
sentences say quite a bit.
yeah, the firms that want to purchase your carbon for some other firm's carbon neutrality. It's been mentioned here tonight. It's been mentioned, right? Most are not willing to pay enough. That might be my opinion. I at one time I did some work on what a ton of CO2 was worth, and I worked on some data. I have some data. I'll show you. But we'll keep going. So I would question, will a farm someday be asked to become carbon neutral? And if you are, and you're giving your credits or your carbon, or selling them, are you going to have to buy some back to offset? I'm just thinking out loud. Think about that. I'm just trying to help you make the right decision for you. That's my goal. Okay? So that's what's happening right now there, and so we can go back to this 45Z. There was just a point here, the GREET model. You talked about the GREET model. It's not USDA. It is not. It's Argonne Labs, which is the Department of Energy. And they're different. Okay? They have scientists working on these things, and there's several GREET models as I understand it. Okay, there's several, depending upon what they're looking at. Okay? And so, I think I need to keep going. Here's the Farm Bill spending from 2000 to 2030. You will notice that conservation and commodities and crop insurance are in this blue, and you'll notice what the orange. You'll notice what the orange is. I'm not trying to make that point, but focus on the blue, because then this is what IRA funding did to the blue. Okay? So this is CRP, that's EQIP, that's CSP, that's an easement, and that's RCPP, which is a grant type of program that they have. And that's, about $5 billion, the blue. IRA funding is stacking on top of that. Big point here. We're right here. Draw that line up. We're projected to even have more money coming in. Projected. That's the word I used. Because we know what's going on right now. So, you're all talking about verification when you're talking about CI scores. That's verification. Who's going to do it? Who's going to control it? La-di-da-di-da-da. I'm here to tell you it hasn't even been decided yet. Okay? USDA intent to establish the Greenhouse Gas Technical Assistance Provider and Third-Party Verification Program. That got done on December 20, as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act. This came out on February 27, 2024. I try to include everything. I don't want to read it all to you, but I want to show you that I've put a hell of a lot of work into this. Okay? I really have. And I don't know everything. There's no way. Who can? Who can? So, USD has an intent to do that. I learned that USDA was receiving nominations for this council, and it ended on, see the date? Just in October 15th of this year. The council terms will begin when? 2025. Doesn't say January, doesn't say June, doesn't say December. It says 2025. The council will be made up of this structure. 2 from USDA, 1 from EPA, 12 from ag industry, at least 6 farmers, 4 who are private forest owners, 4 from science, 2 with expertise in this. 2, this is private, these are private companies. So 2 there, 3 non-governmental organizations, maybe someone from the Soil Health Coalition could be on it, right? That's a non-governmental organization. 3 from private sector businesses, and then any other individual whom the secretary deems important. We don't even know the names yet. Okay, so you're talking about CI scores, you're talking about all this. It's talk, okay? It is. There's been a lot of, oh, it's going to be the GREET model. There's another model called COMET. That's USDA's model, is COMET. I'm not even going to show you that tonight because it's pages and pages and pages. Okay? So it's the GREET that you're all focusing on. Okay, there was a report that went part of this verification thing, and these were just some things I want to share with you about that, but I think it's all meaningful, okay? I mean, it doesn't appear to be under the table. You got to realize if you want to change something, you got to get in the game, right? You got to get in the game. So I kind of wished I would have known about that nomination because I had some people I wanted to nominate, right? I didn't even know about it. Actually, I'd like to have been on it. That's how you bring change, right? You got to have an influence. You got to get in a place where you can, okay. And you're right, we are the people. Okay, we're going to keep going. If you want to learn more about any of this, the Cornell Law School has a lot of information, these other sites. But I want to tell you that the corn producer farmers never mentioned. Never. It's about the production of biofuel. Okay? And you're in the midst of providing that feedstock to make those fuels. And then that's when they're coming in. Okay, so I got an example on CI score here. We did a study a number of years ago. We never intended to do CI score, but we looked at some conventional farms and some no-till farms, got some data, and I was able to have enough data to plug that into the GREET model. Here's the conventional farms. There's the no-till farms with cover crops. One of them had livestock. The CI score on the conventional way is about 34, and the CI score on the no-till with cover crops was 11.3. Okay, keep flying. You can go get that model yourself. It took me some time to find it. And I'm maybe a little more computer savvy, I don't think I am, but I found it. There it is, you can get it, you can download it, you can do your own score. Okay, you got to click on that one there. I'm just trying to show you. Here's what the page looks like. The scores are over here. You got to enter some data. You got to know your fuel. You got to know your fertilizer. You got to know your chemical. That stuff. You enter it in there and you get your own score. So in summary, this really seems all unbelievable, doesn't it? I get it. I get it. I don't want you to be anxious. But it is reality because you can go find all these things. It's happening. It's happening. It's concerning something we can't see, feel, or smell. Think about that. Right? I drink CO2 every day. Do you? If you have a bottle of pop, you're drinking CO2. I love it. It makes me feel good. I joke, I get my carbon every day, right? I think that's the way you gotta feel about this, please. Just there's a bottle. I saw several Cokes here, right? Don't get anxious. Do farmers have the key to the solution? What do you think? Anybody? Well, you grow the feedstocks for the biofuel, right? You can't deny that, that's reality. I think you should think about that. I don't know what that means, but do you have that key? Higher soil carbon benefits all farmers by increasing productivity and decreasing reliance on nutrient inputs. Soil carbon is your friend. There's no doubt about it. Okay? Soil health should be the reason to adopt these practices. We had a discussion at the Soil Health Coalition board meeting, and it was clear we wanted to make a distinction between the reasons for doing soil health to benefit your own farm, for your generational investment in your farm, and not to do soil health for a CI score. Learn why soil health is important. That's the message. And by the way, if you have to make a decision about one of these things, hey, that's your decision. That's your decision. I don't think anybody can tell you what to do or what not to do. But I would get educated, and I would read. I mean, any lawyer will tell you, read everything, or give it to them to read, right? Just feel comfortable about your decision if you make one. That was my goal for tonight. That's it, okay? I didn't have any questions. Thank you.
If there's any,
Is there a question?
we got 2 speakers left. Can you make it really fast?
Yep, sure. What's up? He's coming.
This thing, there now, it's working. Can you please make it quick?
A lot of people in this room are concerned about CO2 pipeline. 2,185 pounds of pressure per square inch in a chemical that kills animals and people. And one of the reasons, my reason's a little different than a lot of others. To me, the CO2 pipeline would be ineffective on the climate. And I come to this conclusion because there was a study done a few years ago. Dr. Tyler Lark and the University of Wisconsin, Department of Energy, United States Department of Energy, and also Wildlife Federation, they did this study, and they come to the conclusion that corn-based ethanol is at least 24% more carbon intensive than just burning gasoline. Have you heard of this study?
I have not. I'm just gonna say I don't know anything about that one. I'm sorry. So. Anybody else? No? I thought I was gonna create a lot of. I'm happy actually. You're not throwing anything at me. So. Clap your hands.
Tim, hold it. We got one more speaker before you. Yeah.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Hell, yeah.
I might not have gave you that
That's
updated.
fine.
I got a quick question for everybody. Do you want to get up and stretch for 5 minutes, or should we just keep going and get done?
Keep going.
Okay, that's all I need to know. I thought we might need a stretch. We have Michael Klipfel from up by Aberdeen is going to talk about a little bit of a different topic about these data centers that are being built. It's very interesting. We'll try to get through it as fast as we can. Then we got Tim Kenyon to finish up. But this is the information you probably don't even know anything about.
Yeah, thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate that very much. I'm an organic farmer from northwest of Aberdeen. I know all about carbon, but I'm not here to talk about that. In our part of the country, in our neck of the woods right now, there are data centers being built and being proposed that are going to use absolutely astronomical amounts of power. There's one in Elmdale, North Dakota that I'm going to tell you about first. They built 9 Bitcoin farming buildings that require a megawatt per building. And we'll get to how much that is here in a minute. But they also built another, they're in the process of constructing another facility to house AI or just memory places to put chips to have memory on them. And that building is 600 feet by 600 feet square, about 360,000 square feet. That's going to be filled with these chips that they use to house the cloud or whatever else it is. But just for some numbers that it's going to require for them to do that and to get an understanding of it, that place originally started out as a 100 megawatt facility. Then they changed it to a 300 megawatt facility. And 300 megawatts is about the same amount of power that the Fargo-Moorhead area uses. This is in one location near Elmdale, North Dakota. Now recently they went to 520 megawatts, and now the most recent one is they want to do a 1,000 megawatt facility, or 1 gigawatt, which is approximately 25% of all the power that North Dakota uses. They want that all in that one facility. And we're going to tie this all together with what Carla and Julie were talking about earlier here by the time I get finished, and I'm going to do it as quickly as I can. But then they're proposing another facility, a data center west of Leola. That's my hometown. It's a 50 megawatt is all it is. But in the counties of Edmonds, McPherson, and Falk County, which are our rural electric counties, up until a few years ago, we used approximately 15 megawatts for all 3 counties. Then we built the ethanol plant there by Mina Lake, and that virtually doubled it to about 25 megawatts. And this facility, one little facility west of Leola, will use 50 megawatts of power, twice as much as the entire McPherson County, Falk County, and Edmonds County used before. So what we're looking at, and I believe, is that there's going to be a shortfall in electricity, and I have something here that might actually tie that in, but we have, I have a graph here, and I can't put it up there, I'm sorry, from Morgan Stanley Research. The United States uses approximately 4,000 gigawatts, that would be with a lot of zeros, and we have under construction, and they expect that to happen between 26 and 28, that we need that. Under construction is about facilities to do about 500 gigawatts worth of electricity. We have the infrastructure to handle about 1,500 gigawatts. So that means by 2028, we're going to be short about 2,300 gigawatts, or almost half the electricity that we actually will need will not be available. And these facilities that they're building, these data centers, they're not going to let them run out of electricity, because if they do, all their memory gets lost. They're actually having 3 to 4 different electrical sources coming their way. And they're going to cover us with wind towers and solar panels. When we have I had an opportunity to be on the FEM board, the electrical board, about 10 years ago, so I did some research there. And in North Dakota, they have what is referred to as recoverable coal, or coal that is less than 100 feet under the topsoil. There's enough coal in North Dakota to make enough electricity for the United States for 850 years. And the real kicker of that is there's 10 times more coal in Montana than there is in North Dakota. So we virtually can't run out of coal, but they don't want us to use that because they can't control us if we have all the electricity we need. So
anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up because it's gonna be a little longer night than we thought, and I appreciate you listening to me. I'm gonna just check real quick here, make sure I didn't miss something that I wanted to tell you. I have so much I'd like to add to the carbon thing, but that's not what I'm here for tonight, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Any questions?
Okay. Oh, there it is. Just one thing to add, and I'm sure you know this. How many gallons of water does 1 megawatt, this is South Dakota water, folks. How many gallons of water does 1 megawatt take per day?
Actually, I don't, Julie.
24,000 gallons.
One
So-
1 megawatt.
1 megawatt. So you're proposing a 50 megawatt facility in Edmonds and
No, this one is westerly, all in McPherson County.
McPherson County. 50 megawatts is 1.2 million gallons of water a day. They use it to cool their compressors in their the computer systems. That's our water. So keep that in mind, folks. These CI credits, everything. Sure, it's a check it's fast gratification. But what are we doing to our state? Please keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. It's information that we aren't gonna hear.
Thank you.
We'll get it over to Tim Kenyon. You guys have seen him some of the other meetings this summer. And I think we'll just go from there.
Well, looks like we saved the best for last, huh? My name is Tim Kenyon. I'm a Lake County resident, been here for 38 years, and I'm a geologist. And I want to talk to you about climate change. And why would a geologist know anything about climate change? Because all we do is study the climate of the past. Because the climate of the past is how we know what the geology is, because that's where it all starts. I'm not going to tell you if it is or it isn't man-made. I'm going to tell you what I think about it and what I've uncovered from reading, God, countless scientific papers. I had to buy a new hard drive for my computer to make room for them all, okay? I've been reading scientific papers on climate change since the endangerment finding on April 2nd, 2007. The first couple months of the Obama administration. And that's where the state of Massachusetts sued the federal government, sued the EPA. And the Supreme Court of the U.S. came down with a decision that said our environment is being harmed by emissions from cars and trucks. And they named 6 different compounds, and I won't bother with what they are. CO2 is one of them. That said, you the EPA, are now tasked with regulating those emissions. So if you look for the seminal legislation on where all this started, that's it. And that's when I started reading papers about climate change, because it was very interesting to me, and I wanted to be informed. I really did. Being a scientist, I'm not reading papers just on one side of the issue or the other. I'm trying to read them all. I really, honest to God, I'm trying to read them all. And I want to give you an idea of kind of where I'm at. Really, we're looking at the last 500,000 years. For geology, that's kind of an eye blink, right? Because we're dealing with hundreds of millions of years. But the last 500,000 years, we've had really 5 times the glaciers were here. 5 glacial ice ages in the last 500,000 years. And 5 interglacial periods. And those interglacial periods, the glacial periods last about 100,000 years, plus or minus. And the interglacials last 10 to 20,000 years, and we are in an interglacial right now. 10,000 years ago, if you were sitting here, you'd be under about a mile of ice. If you can imagine that. 5,000 feet of ice here in Lake County 10,000 years ago. So keep that in mind, and also understand that glacial regression and removal is geologic based. It's not based on temperature. It's based on what we see in the landscape.
Tim, can you pull that cord a little bit? It's vibrating the mic, that's, we're getting feedback. There we go.
Is that better?
Hopefully that takes out that.
They'd get tangled up. So the temperature, the climate is changing. We all know that because the ice isn't here anymore. The question is it man-made? There are three lines of evidence that are three primary lines of evidence. One is the temperature record, and I'm going to talk about the temperature record a bunch. The other one is CO2 in the atmosphere, and we've already seen the Keeling curve that Anthony put up here, the one that went up like that. Mr. Keeling started measuring CO2 on a volcano in Hawaii in 1957, and that's really where all that comes from. And the other is sea level rise. Let's talk about the temperature record. He showed you a temperature record that went back a long time, and I don't have the graphics, but if you looked at a temperature record that goes back 500,000 years, it comes from ice cores. And there are two places they do the ice cores that go back that far. One is in Greenland, and one is in Antarctica. And they drill down, and they find air bubbles in the ice. And so they take those air bubbles and they analyze them for oxygen isotopes, which is an indicator of the temperature of those gases, right? They also measure CO2 in them, and there's a problem with that, but I'll get to that. The further you go back in the data, the less temporal resolution there is in that data. Right now we measure temperatures on a continuous basis, actually. By the time you get back 500,000 years in the ice data, the temporal resolution is at best 10 years. So we have one number that covers 10 years. When you get about halfway up in that, it's about 7 years. So when you look at this big long curve, you see all these squiggly lines, right? That show the temperature went up and the temperature went down, the temperature went up and the temperature went down. And in the end it goes bang, goes right off the roof. The comparison of a decadal temperature range with a nearly continuous temperature range is nothing but bad science. And if you read the papers, there's guys out there that are talking about this. And the statistical analysis that goes into that old stuff versus the new stuff. And in fact, if you took the end of this interglacial period and put the same temporal resolution on it that you get from ice cores, there's really no change. We're not any warmer now than it's been in the past. And there's no evidence that's reliable evidence that shows that we're warmer than any time in the interglacials in the past. There's guys, Mr. Mann came up with the famous hockey stick that shows the temperature going along and all of a sudden bang, at the end it goes up. That's been widely debunked. And he even said, maybe that isn't very accurate. So when we look, and I see somebody shaking his head, and I expect that. I respect that. I honest to God do. I would challenge you to spend as many useless years of your life as I have reading papers. Okay, maybe. So when we look at the temperature data, you have to look at it with a great deal of skepticism and understand that it's interesting science to show that things are warming up. You have to understand why. But you have to establish and assign weight to that. How much are you going to change your life based on something that's really maybe not there? Let's look at the last interglacial period, 10,000 years. All of written human history has been in that 10,000 years. Climate is what you expect and weather is what you get. In this last interglacial period, the climate has fluctuated greatly. Let's talk about the rise of civilization and cultivation and domesticated animals. About 6,000 years ago, it was warm. Let's talk about the pyramids that the Egyptians built. That was during a climactic warm period. Let's talk about the rise of the Roman Empire. That was during a climactic warm period. Let's talk about the Dark Ages. That was during a climactic cold period. The climate gets warmer, the climate gets colder. Let's look at the Renaissance and the medieval warm period, when we had all the fantastic art and all of those things. That was a warm period. There were Vikings living in Greenland sowing crops during that period. And you couldn't do that today. You did it then because it was a lot warmer than it is today. Just for, the Romans mined copper in the Alps, in the Italian Alps. And just about 10 years ago, the glaciers had receded enough that they found some Roman mine workings that were previously covered by ice. And what that's got to tell you, if you're a thinking person, is it's been warmer in the past. The Little Ice Age, from about 1300 to about 1850, the rise of the Black Death. It was cold. People started bringing their livestock in Eastern Europe to live in the bottom floor of their house, and the livestock had fleas, and the fleas had the plague, and the plague got to the people, and it killed a whole bunch of people. It was during a climactic cool period. The bottom line of all of this that I have come to from reading these papers is it is not any demonstrably warmer now than it has been in the past. And I know there's folks that are going to disagree with me, and I respect that. Actually, I expect that. Let's look at CO2 in the atmosphere. Mr. Keeling started doing this in 1957. Oh, by the way, he's measuring CO2 on the top of an active volcano. And if you've looked at his actual data set, those 30,000 lines of code in an Excel spreadsheet, and you see the statistical manipulation they have to go through to get that nice, smooth curve, it just makes you wonder. It just does. CO2 has been higher in the past, but then again, you have that same problem with this poor temporal resolution from the ice cores with today. And what geologists do is we compare those CO2 numbers from the ice cores with each other, because that's appropriate. There are a number of chemical processes that happen to these bubbles in the ice that change the number. But it kind of changes them all the same, so you can compare them to each other. You're really comparing them just like the temperature data, comparing them to real-time atmospheric today is, many folks call it poor science. I won't go that far. I say it injects serious doubt into what we're seeing today. Let's talk about sea level rise. Famous sea level rise is in the Marshall Islands in the South Pacific, and those poor folks are getting flooded out. Well, you know why? From a geologist's perspective, they live on an ancient volcano that's sinking into the ocean. Go take a look at the Hawaiian Islands. The ones way up to the north are almost gone in the ocean, and the one down to the south is higher. One of the most difficult parts about measuring sea level rise is, what do you measure it against? You stick a stick in the water, essentially, and you measure where the water goes up and down. The basic assumption is that that stick doesn't go up or down itself. It does. And until we had satellite measurements, there was really no way for the poor people in the Marshall Islands to measure the elevation of the land in their islands. It's just not possible to do with any kind of accuracy at all. I took a look at some sea level records published by NOAA, and some of these data sets go back, 200 years. NOAA says the global sea level rise is 0.13 inches per year. In a decade, that's 1.3 inches. Excuse me, 0.13. In a decade, that's 1.3 inches. And in 100 years, it's 10 times that. It's 13 inches in 100 years. Not sure that's a catastrophe. There's a bunch of other measurements, and they go worldwide. And if you have an understanding of what the ground is doing, it sheds a lot of light on what the sea level might be doing. And in fact, there's a lot of places where the sea level is going down because the glaciers are gone and the land is rebounding. We see that in South Dakota. It's called isostatic rebound. And in fact, if you go to Oahe Reservoir, the east side is coming up relative to the west side, and it's causing some distress with the dam. Because the glaciers were on the east side, the glaciers weren't on the west side, and we're seeing isostatic rebound. So why does it get warm and cold? The Earth is a dynamic system. There is a lot of things that changes. And the orbit of the Earth is not still. There's a number of different fluctuations that cause the amount of solar radiation that reaches the Earth to change. And those are on very long cycles, some of them 100,000 years, down to the precession, which is the wobble of the Earth axis, down to about a 26,000 year cycle. There's solar variability. The amount of radiation that the sun puts out changes, and it changes fairly reliably by looking at counting sunspots, and we've been doing that since the 1600s, and that's on about 11-year cycle. And there are two other lesser known cycles called the Bray and Eddy cycles, which are based on isotopes in the geologic record, and those are on very long scales. There are things called thermohaline circulations in the ocean. There's the North Atlantic Oscillation, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. There's what you probably all have heard of, an El Nino and La Nina. When you put all these things together, and then you look at the coherent temperature range in our current interglacial period, things surprisingly fall in line. That when it's cold, it's supposed to be. And when it's warm, it's supposed to be. And when these cycles come together, that's what gives us our ice ages. It's what gives us our interglacial periods. And we are in an interglacial period as we speak, but this interglacial period doesn't have all of the peaks or valleys completely aligned as some of the previous ones have. And that fits. And what it tells us is it's warm and the glaciers went away, but it fits that it's not any warmer than some of the past ones. And in fact, it's not as warm as some of the past ones. One of the things about CO2 that's of significant discussion is CO2 in the atmosphere a leading or lagging indicator? Does the warming cause the CO2, or does the CO2 cause the warming? You know, the CO2 solubility in seawater is greater when the water's cold. When the water's cold, it contains more CO2. When the water's warm, the CO2 leaves the water and evolves into the atmosphere. When you look at all the different things that cause cooling and warming, as the ocean warms up, it evolves CO2 into the atmosphere. And when you look back, not at the current phase, the recent history, but if you look back in the geologic record, there's very good evidence that CO2 was a result of the warming, not a cause of the warming, which makes you wonder about the warming we're seeing now. I'm trying to give you the Reader's Digest version here. So what that comes down to is the folks on TV and the folks in the White House and people like Greta Thunberg are telling you the science is settled. And I only have one word for that, and you can't say it in public. The science is not settled. And if you take the time to read the accredited, quote-unquote, peer-reviewed, and I see you shaking your head, the quote-unquote peer-reviewed papers, you're going to see that there is a lot of scientific debate going on. And the science is not settled. You can decide whether or not climate change is an existential crisis, based on whatever reading you do. My personal feeling is that there is so much uncertainty that the societal resources we're using to solve something that may not be present could sure be used in a lot of other places to a lot greater benefit to mankind. Climate change is big business. And with that, I would take your, I'm sure you have some questions, or rebuttal.
Remind me of, I gotta see this. Is that working now? Hello, there we go. Tim, I got something. You said a word that brought me back to something I was gonna make a little joke, but with what you just talked about climate change, you are not gonna get a Christmas card from Greta Thunberg.
Yeah, right.
And if you do, it's gonna say, "How dare you?" So be ready.
And if I offended anyone, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to tell you what I learned from reading all these papers. And if you disagree, great, that's the way it works.
I think we got this one. Please make it pretty quick.
Okay. Greta did a book last year that had a number of different peer-reviewed scientists with different backgrounds. It's simply called The Climate Book. I would recommend to take a look at it. One of the things that, and I do find it really fascinating, the physics.
Yes.
And I do respect that you find it fascinating too, because it really is. One of the things that I heard on sea level rise, and it makes sense to me, was you have thermal expansion because the ocean is so deep and it warms, so it expands, which is about 50% of the rise.
And then where you're at.
Yeah, and then also the centrifugal force, which pulls the water towards the equator, more so as the ice melts. And those two things kind of also help to increase the height. And it is happening all the way around the world, not just at those islands.
Here's this experiment you guys could all do. And I would encourage you to do this experiment. One of the things these guys are telling us, and one of their principal lines of investigation, is that the polar ice caps in the Arctic regions, Antarctic regions, are warming at a rate that's many, many times the temperate regions, right?
Oh yeah, it's like 4.5 times faster at least right now than
Exactly. So do this, go home, get 3 thermometers, put one on the kitchen counter, put one in your refrigerator, and put one in the freezer. Record the temperatures. Open the refrigerator and freezer doors and see which temperature changes the fastest. Just do that for me. Tell me what you find. What you're going to find is the temperature in the freezer changes a whole lot faster than the temperature in the refrigerator or the temperature on the counter, and that's because there's more heat capacity that it can take up.
Have you looked at the positive feedback loops like the methane hydrates from the ocean seabed?
Sir, yes, sir. And the thermohaline circulations that go right with that.
And I think it's really...
And it's not convincing.
Problem happens, right?
Yeah, it's just not convincing.
Well, it's happening. You just look at the measurement.
The question is, it might be happening, and let's not even talk about computer models, but it might be happening, but what's the relative contribution? That's the key.
The measurements are observed.
I'd love to sit down with you. These folks all want to know.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody, drive careful.